Okay, next, actually, I would like to welcome Sarita Nair here this evening, the Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Albuquerque. Ms. Nair is the mayor's representative for this evening. I don't know if you wanted to say a few words?
No, thanks. Just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So next, we have approval of the minutes. Are there any changes to the August 23rd, 2018 meeting minutes? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next item we have is public comment. And we have two speakers this evening, Mr. Rudolph Serrano, and followed by Lorraine Anslover.
Councilor Peña and members of the council, Sarita, representing the city. Good evening. I'm supposed to be in the subcommittee, but there was a mistake and I got pushed out. So my presentation is not going to be able to be here tonight, but I'm going to try to put it in 2 minutes for you. I was in the Occupy movement. You know, I have 100 tents of homeless people for 90 days. And 4 months out of the year, I'm homeless because I have to pay rent here and live in Miami. You know, so I have a lot of experience with mental disability, mental retardation, and the answers that are real. Because, I mean, we have a lot of plans, but what is real out there with a lot of drug dealers trying to attack our people all the time, you know, what it works is mobility. Constant mobility is a necessity for these people. What I was trying to encourage was like small RVs, something that you can pay $250 a month out of Social Security that these people have, and something that they can move from place to place. My plan, the way it works for me, we can put that picture, and you can always ask what that is, and we can go more than 2 minutes. But you got it?
I think so.
Okay, this is, can you see it? Okay, that's the PTSD Cruiser. You know, that's pretty much a solution that I found for less than $2,000, and it works realities. You know, it's real, it's cost effective, you know, and it's not an RV, but it's something that everybody can make with $3,000 and get out of the streets. And what this does, with $10 a day, you can move from Walmart to Walmart and do a rotation nationwide. So we keep our disability people on treatment, because these people, you know, they may be mentally unstable, but they're welcome, you know, and they are able to come back to our society. There's a way to heal. If we're just going to put them in a little box, they're going to suicide. We're in a suicide week here. They're going to be target of drug dealers. This plan is a 4-year plan that I've been working in, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Serrano. The next speaker is Lorraine Anslover.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to talk to you. I'm Lorraine, and I am representing a few employees at the VA hospital, mostly healthcare providers. We are having a fall benefit concert to benefit the Veterans Integration Center at the Veterans Memorial. I've invited, I think, most of you to come. I just wanted to ask for some awareness and possibly some support. I would like anyone who would like to speak there to be there. We're expecting a group from 500 to 1,000 people. We've had many generous volunteers and donations to get this thing going. A lot of musicians have volunteered their time, and we're going to have several bands. Why I'm here today is because you are speaking on homelessness, and the Veterans Integration Center has reduced New Mexico veteran homelessness since they opened by 83%, which is astounding. They have, on one side of Central and El Dorado, they have the Veterans Integration Center thrift store where they, you know, have their office. And on the other side, they have a 42-room hotel where they house veterans and families for assisting with people who are trying to get back on their feet. And I just wanted to be here to tell you about my event. And I know that some of you have responded and said that you might be there. Thank you. You have.
Thank you. So you haven't said tonight when and where?
10/20, October 20th, at the Veterans Memorial on Louisiana and Gibson. And I just wanted to let you know that there is a table for you if you want. There's a platform if you want to speak. I just really want to make it successful. I really want the mayor or mayor's representative to come and support us. We've had all volunteers that are doing it, and I've never been to a political meeting or spoke to anybody before, but I just wanted to ask you all to come and to give support, and we've had generous support from the community, and I think 83% is a huge number, and Wendy Weber at the Veterans Integration Center and all those people have done an amazing job, and I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting. There's a lot of people. There's going to be a blood drive that day. There's going to be children's activities, and on the very same day, the 357th, the Kirtland Air Force Base is putting on something called the Red, White, and Blues event. And she wanted us to combine our events, but when I found out that they were giving away alcohol-free to veterans, I did not want to combine, because addiction is one of the main reasons that a lot of our veterans are having problems getting stable homes. So that's all. Thank you so much, and if anybody wants to, you could look on the Veterans Integration Center website. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. We have the Journal here this evening. Also, maybe they will do something in the newspaper to advertise your event. So thanks for all your good work. Next item, we have new business. Item A, City of Albuquerque Homeless Plan Update. We have Carol Pierce, Director of Family and Community Services, giving the presentation.
Thank you, Chair
Welcome.
Pena and council members. I asked to be on this agenda, and thank you for having me tonight. The City of Albuquerque has been talking to a variety of our community stakeholders to talk about the homeless plan that we are working in collaboration with our county partners and UNM, to talk kind of in big picture concepts, to dialogue with our partners in the community about how this project will roll forward and have conversations. So we've been, so that's why I'm here tonight. And we've been meeting with about 9 different groups. We just got done meeting with HopeWorks, and just to have a conversation about thoughts as we roll forward. So I'm just going to talk about these concepts and open for questions. So first of all, I think we all know in our community, that part of our challenge is we need one place for our law enforcement to take people that may have a challenge, may have a behavioral health challenge, who are not necessarily homeless. And I'm starting with that piece because it's so important. I think we all share the hope that we don't have our law enforcement, whether it's sheriff or APD or the fire department, having to take people to hospitals or taking them to jail. That's not where we want them to go. And not all homeless people have behavioral health problems. We have people in our community that are living in homes but may be experiencing a behavioral health crisis. So one of the components that we need, and the county has been talking about this for a while, we're in big support of that, is a behavioral health, a triage center. And that's a place where someone could go, they could get help from a mental health professional that could determine what the treatment is right then and there. And it wouldn't tie up then a police officer in an ER or taking somebody to jail. Concurrently, we know that we need to expand what we might call emergency housing, but it's emergency shelter for people who are homeless. So right now, I think we all know on the west side, we've got the West Side Shelter. It's the old jail, and typically the city has opened that up mid-November to mid-March. And it's not open 24 hours. It's just to help keep people safe and housed and off the streets during the coldest part of the year, but then they're being bussed back into town for services. So I think many of us, several of us, had the chance to go see the San Antonio model several months ago and learn from that experience. And we were delighted to go with many of you as well as the business community and really learned that had a lot of great things to offer. And one of the aspects is that there is 365 days a year a place for somebody who is homeless to go to get out of the elements and to connect to services. So starting in November, we are opening up, this is our hope, is to open up the emergency shelter on the west side for 24 hours a day, and to have services out there from some of our other partners to offer case management services for them as well. There will be hourly transportation to get folks out there, but then they'll be coming into town to access services here, make their appointments for, it may be behavioral. I was glad to see the Veterans Reintegration Center. Sometimes we have veterans that need to come into town to get those benefits lined up. So that's the short term to begin in November, but we know long term that we think whether it's one side or a dispersed model around town, that we need that emergency housing. And we kind of like to move to the term emergency housing. That there would be 3 to 4 sites potentially, or one site where people could get out of the elements, access services, and always have the back door to housing, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Because we think that the best thing we can do is to make sure people are on the path and getting the services to housing. So what we're saying, it's to the back door, and you'll hear that a lot of our proposal is about really beefing up our housing services. Right now, we're in very close partnership with the county, along with HopeWorks and Yes Housing that won the RFP award, to have a supportive housing project for 42 people that have severe mental health concerns. So that's one aspect of housing that we really look at. What kinds of housing do people need if they need supportive housing? But so shelter's important, but always with that back door. I like to tell this because I thought this was very informative when we did go to San Antonio. I had the chance to meet with my counterpart in San Antonio. I thought that was very helpful. We wanted to hear what they thought about Haven for Hope. How did that work? How did it help? And I thought she was positive. Yep, it was a great model. But really within the first 5 minutes of us speaking, she wished they had more money for housing. And we took note of that because we agree. We think it's important to have the services, but not at the expense of having such a heavy operational budget that you can't put more money to get people off the streets in supportive housing or other kinds of housing services. So part of the plan, so again, crisis triage center, getting people out of the elements in emergency shelter that have services there and a back door, and then really looking at funding like 1,000 new supportive housing vouchers on an annual basis to really help those folks that are most vulnerable to get them into housing. I know I'm preaching to the choir here if I talk about the housing first model. I think that's what we know. That's the solution to homelessness. I know all folks who are homeless, it's not one size fits all. People have various problems, some with addiction, some without, some lost a job. So the housing model would look different depending on what the need is. We'd like to really create about somewhere a couple hundred new units for quality, affordable housing for those low and moderate income Albuquerque members, and do that with the GEO bond, again, to build out that housing inventory, if you will, to really meet that need. We currently have, and our inventory between all of our different resources have many people that do outreach right now, and we think that's great. That's what folks who are on the street, they need to connect with an outreach worker, and there may be, a dozen to 20 folks, and we know that we need to coordinate that better. We've had really great conversations in our public safety meeting to talk about, and how are we communicating? We're not sure, but is that an app that whether it's law enforcement, these outreach workers use that identify somebody that may be typically on the corner of Lomas and whatever cross street, and that we know that person's name. We know if maybe they have a diagnosis, maybe they're on medication, or maybe they have a dog and what's their dog's name. We just want those details to, again, put that human face on people who are homeless and have the communication mechanism around outreach workers and also our public safety workforce. We also think that given it takes all of us to solve our homeless problem. The county's been working on this, the city's been working on this, UNM, and all of us, whether our business owners, kind of pay the price when we don't coordinate and get this right. So we think we need a coordinating advisory council where really folks will come together as we look at all the parts and measure our effectiveness as we go forward. That's another concept that we're putting on the table. And lastly, one of the things that we've been doing, and it's in our Department of Family and Community Services, is looking at our existing contracts to our homeless providers to tighten up a little bit in how are we keeping them accountable? How are they working well with our neighborhoods? So we make sure that it's working for everyone and looking at some of our contract language there. So I've kind of kept that very brief, very high level, and I'll pause there and be open for questions.
Counselor Benton.
Thank you, Director Pierce. I just wanted to touch on two, I guess, question of terminology or lingo or whatever, right? So one is housing first. So a lot of people think, well, that just means, well, you get the roof over their head and then deal with the rest later.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that, and so you explain that. That means, yeah, you get the roof over their head first, along with service and social service providers that can keep track and help people succeed. The other thing is that and you didn't mention this one, but the idea of single site. We keep hearing about single site, and that's something that's been discussed and actually came out. It's part of the literature and so forth. It doesn't mean that there's one site where we're going to house all the homeless people or people with behavioral disabilities. It means that on most likely, if we're going to eventually get to 400 dwelling units of this type of housing, it would be numerous single site projects. But on those, when they say single site, just so the public understands, we mean a single site where a person can live and access those services. And you know, there's a lot of strength in numbers in that, where if you've got 40 dwellings and you've got a social service full-time person, at least during the day, present, then it makes it that much easier for people to access those services instead of having to travel, having to go in a shuttle or get on the city bus and make it to their appointment. So that's what we mean when we say single site. But really, I think ultimately we'd be talking about multiple single site. To be fair also, again, I appreciate the work you're doing with our neighborhoods downtown. To be fair throughout the city, but these are places that are not going to exacerbate problems with homelessness or with people on the street suffering from disabilities, behavioral disabilities, but rather to the contrary, getting them off the street and getting them some help right there in their building.
Right.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam Chair, excuse me.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am pleased to see that we are looking at opening the emergency shelter on the west side year-round, and I'm even happier to hear that we're going to provide some of the services, because without the services, the shelter is not going to benefit anyone. And also, I think one of the things that we need to look at very carefully, the homeless problem has become a major problem here in the city of Albuquerque and throughout Bernalillo County. And I know there's been a lot of work that has been done by this committee, and we need to continue to work on some of the initiatives that have been put into place.
Yes.
And one of the ultimate goals is to build the Crisis Resource Stabilization Triage Center. I think that's going to be very important. But again, we look at the Haven of Hope project in San Antonio. I think that was a $100 million project. Has anyone been out to Salt Lake City to look at what they've done there? Because I know their homeless population has been decreased by over 90%. And I'd like to maybe have some of us go out and look at what they've done there, because that's another success story.
Thank you, Chair and Councilor Sanchez. I have not been out to Salt Lake City to investigate. There may have been members of the department, since I'm relatively new, that have, but welcome the chance to look at another community's model. I am not Salt Lake, but I am meeting with the gentleman tomorrow that just recently moved here from the Tucson area, is retiring and worked in the homeless community for the last 30 years, meeting with him because now he's a member of this community, wants to know. So we always welcome what we can learn from neighboring states and welcome the opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Quesada.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of different types of questions. One regarding the shelter on the west side. We know that you need assistance to make sure that the services are provided. I know that in the county, with what we're doing with our behavioral dollars, is in order for it to be successful and sustainable, is that we have been working with community partners and people
Yes.
who work with us, and it's not always funded through, our behavioral dollars, but we combine the dollars that they're bringing in with our dollars to fill these gaps. I think that's something that would be strong for the west side. And it doesn't always have to fall on government entities to, provide those types of services. We have many different partnerships, pathways, that can assist you in that. Because we know that that's a temporary thing, and that eventually when you bring it to the city, we want to still have those partnerships in place. So I don't know if that's really a question or a statement, but I'm thinking that's that's part of how we're gonna solve making sure that they have the services year round. And I know that that's just a temporary plan, maybe a couple of years until the full plan comes into play. So I'd like to see more of that. I think as we sit here at the ABCGC, this is more of a collaboration between the county. This is a collaboration between the county and the
Yes.
city.
Yes.
And I think that, our behavioral health people should be always talking with you. I
Yes.
think that we should vet things together. We may not be able to fund everything equally, and that we're looking for gaps, but I think that if we do things together, then, then we can really identify the holes that are missing as we move forward. Because when we're talking about the housing and us trying to deal with that issue, we all know that, everybody up here knows that there's not a one size fits all. And I think that's been mentioned, but I don't think the community really knows that it's a very complex puzzle in order for us to even try to put a dent in the problems that we're having in the city. And I just wanted to make a statement to let people know that, it's 40 beds here, it's 30 beds here, and it's 20 beds here, and it's this type of plan, and it's that type of plan. And the reason why that is the case is because each individual has their own distinct types of needs and come from a different type of services or background. And we want to make sure that they are put in the proper type of facility and places for the best success. And it's not, I've heard comments from the community saying, well, that's only 40 beds. And we can't sit around and wait to build a facility that houses 40,000 people or 4,000 people for that matter, or whatever the number may be. We need to piece it together and try to put this puzzle together the best that we can. I just wanted to make a comment on that, but I also want you to respond to how are we partnering up with the county and our behavioral health people.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Quesada and Chair Pena. We're working very closely with the county. I don't know if Katrina's here tonight. I know Sam is here. And since I came, we've been talking together about how we work together. I think I'm on the agenda in a few moments to talk about how behavioral health, because I think there is wonderful examples how the city and the county are working together. So especially around the need to respond to the homeless situation, we know it's not one entity. It's all about partnership. I attended the chamber luncheon today, and part of it is we try to be there wherever our business community is. It's honestly one of the things I was grateful the most about the San Antonio trip, is to be there with members of our chamber, because we will only be stronger when our business community is stronger, but we're doing this together. We don't have all the answers. It's a combination of efforts. I was very pleased. Again, I think the mayor used the partnership multiple times as he expressed some of these big ideas around homelessness and other things today. I think one of the things that the mayor has done with Ms. Nair, our CAO, as well as meeting with Dr. Roth at UNM, leadership there, I think with Julie as well, was looking at our putting some 3 action teams together as we roll this out. Because one, we have this interim strategy. November's right around the corner. We want to open that full time. How do we do that? It's going to require some more resources. How do we all come together on that? Same thing with the facilities group. So city has ideas. I'm sure county does, UNM. How do we work together? Because we're all in this together to solve that. And the third one was an operations group. So I think those are just bubbling up right now. But I'm very excited about that because it gets everybody at the table to say, pool our thinking, pool our resources to move this together. I'm very clear it takes all of us to move this ahead. And I thank you for your comment about the partnerships and beyond government. That was one of the many reasons we're going out to have these conversations, whether it's at Coronado Park and the church that is serving homeless people, or many other entities that we've identified to just go out and talk and say, here's some of our thinking. How will that impact you? What do you think? Because it does take all of us to respond to our homeless individuals.
And one last question.
Yes.
On your plans as you move forward, have you put them through the subcommittees that we have put in place through the behavioral health, that has been put through the ABCGC? That's one of the things that we have really decided, that there's a process that we do as we, as things come to us and we vote on them, that they go through the subcommittees. And I would like to know that everything has gone through those subcommittees as we move forward, just because it's a process. And,
Yeah.
and as you know, there's many professionals on those subcommittees and very, very big champions in all aspects of behavioral health and the homeless problem.
Thank you, Commissioner Quesada, for that question. At this point, there was a dialogue with the supportive housing, I probably don't have their name right. It's the housing subcommittee, and that presentation happened last week, and the dialogue began there. I think that was last Tuesday night. So we've begun that process to, again, kind of big picture talk about it, but we have more that needs to be done.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Ms. Pierce. It's good to hear what the mayor's ideas are on moving forward, and really, I mean, we're talking about an idea stage at this point, not really plans. I think that's important to note. Plan has got a little more flesh on it in terms of who's going to pay for what, which is going to be very important, and who's going to be responsible for what, which is also very important. I wanted to bring up the idea of partnerships because I was also at the chamber meeting, and we certainly talked a lot about that and the importance of working together, communicating with one another, and that's how you build trust between folks who are working on a project. And I think that's very important, but that doesn't happen quickly. It happens over a period of time. I think a lot of times we just want to rush to try and fix something, but if you look at everything that's been done in terms of successfully moving something forward, it takes time. So I think that's going to be really important. I had a question about, you mentioned that you think we need about 200 to 300 more units of affordable housing. Were you referring to single-site supportive housing, as Councilor Ike Benton pointed out?
Thank you, Commissioner O'Malley. No, I'm just referring to low or moderate income housing units. That was a ballpark idea, about 200 housing units. And that's different than what Councilor Benton was mentioning, that supportive housing. We definitely need more supportive housing unit, and we've talked about 1,000 more new supportive housing vouchers. So that would be more in line with what Councilor Benton is mentioning, that this current model that we're all working on collectively, the city and the county, the supportive housing that was referred to as single site, but it's the one site with 42 beds. No, we are proposing there needs to be a lot more of that. We need to learn from this current process that we're going through, and I'm feeling quite favorable about it, how we're doing this together and learning with our neighborhoods, with our providers, but we need more of those, and that's two parts. There's supportive housing, and then there's many more affordable housing units. To illustrate the point that several of you mentioned, that the face of homelessness looks different. It's not one size fits all.
Right. So of course, we participated in the single-site supportive housing project that is downtown.
Yes.
I believe there's $2 million of the county's money that went into construction. Of course, that's not our project, though. The city of Albuquerque is administering that project. But I think it's important to note, and while obviously was supportive of it, I certainly was, I think people need to realize that these are not inexpensive models to move forward. They're costly models, especially when we talk about intense case management. And I think that's where a lot of times the community gets not too happy about it. But I'm glad that it did move forward. I'm glad that did get approved, so that's a good thing. And in terms of the more units of housing, do you have who you're planning to serve? You said of 200, 300 units of housing. Do you have any idea who you're trying to serve in terms of income at this point?
That's a good question. I low and moderate income, I don't have the exact statistics on. I could get that for you. But the idea is that some folks that may need that kind of service aren't necessarily homeless with zero or very few benefits. These may be what you might call people that are underemployed or are really trying to make it work, but are on that one paycheck away from being on our streets. So I think that's where it's really a continuum of need to respond to the housing need.
Okay. Let me see if I had any other questions. I guess we'll have some more comments on the triage center. I know we're moving forward with that on the county level, and which is good to hear. And we'll have a report from that soon. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Benton.
Yeah, just quickly, I wanted to recognize Commissioner O'Malley and her leadership when we passed the workforce housing ordinance and the workforce housing trust fund. And that's something that when we started out, it was a set aside, am I right, wasn't it? It was actually a percentage of the capital budget. That changed subsequent to after a few years, and we got back to the point where the council and the mayor have to scratch out what we can every year. And I understand, and I appreciate also the commitment that I understand that the mayor has to beef that up. We've seen proposals come down from the previous mayor of 2.2 million, which is barely enough to build one project during a capital cycle. And we've got to increase that. We've got to have that discussion. I guess I'm talking more to my fellow councilor members and to the administration than to the whole body. But that's a big part of our contribution and our potential contribution to the issue. So the public needs to be aware of that as well when we start talking about capital budgets.
Yes.
Thank you. And
just like to say thank you, Councilor Benton, and thank you, Councilor Mel. I'm glad you pointed out, because being new to the city, that workforce housing trust fund, as I realize that, thank you for all the leadership here that has created that, because that is one of those gems in our community, the fact that was created. I mean, we're hoping that the percent, maybe it would be about 10 million of that could go into beefing up our housing availability for people in need. So I should say thank you. I didn't know all the folks sitting up there that had really made that possible. So thank you for mentioning that, Councilor Benton, and thank you, Commissioner O'Malley.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, I have a couple of questions. So, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this. There's been, a lot of dialogue going on in terms of the behavioral health tax, and I really want to thank Commissioner O'Malley again, because, we went back and forth in terms of this tax. Had put it forth at the city, and the previous administration vetoed it. She put it forth at the county and got it passed, and it's really something that's obviously was direly needed in our community. So it's set in motion a lot of dialogue, right, on how to get, there's an emergency out there, right, but how do we do it, so all I can say to the new administration is that there's been a lot of work, although sometimes it seems as though things are moving not as quickly as we hope. There's actually been a lot of work and a lot of thought into what's happened. So I just want to make sure with the new administration that we really work to, there was a gap analysis done, and, there's lots of committees formed and put together to really identify what were the services and what's needed. Is a triage center needed? I have some yes, but at what point is it needed? For me, knowing that some of the services that we have out there in the community, for me, those need to be shored up before we even look at building some building, right? So that kind of concerns me as we start to talk about just the triage center and in homelessness. And when we have the conversations about homelessness, I just want to make sure that, and you had mentioned earlier that, then you're going to talk about behavioral health. For me, these are synonymous with each other, right? The behavioral health, the homelessness, the substance abuse issues. So, and really getting somebody to the point of even entering a triage center is just almost impossible. So me having personal experience with it, I know that before I'm supportive of something, even, housing first, I think housing's important, but, it takes a lot of work to get somebody to the door of, to even begin to look at recovery or, even trying to get into housing, because as you know, a lot of the folks that are homeless, they want to be out there, right, because of some other issues that are related to the homelessness. And not everyone, but that's a lot of it. But so anyway, I just want to say that I think that, I love that, the partnership. I think it's important. I think it's important as we move forward to listen to, when you've done that, you went out there and done a lot of the work in terms of talking with community members. I think that for me, that's a biggie for me, but then to really listen to the folks who've done all this legwork in terms of the gaps analysis and kind of how they formulated moving forward. And I was actually talking to Commissioner O'Malley, and I couldn't remember what the plan was called. So does anyone, Ms. Baca, know what, we adopted a plan on how we move forward and how we vote on all these items? No, we're all at a loss. So anyway, just so, keep the conversations up. Good work, and thank you.
Thank you.
So next item, under old business, we have item A, continuing behavioral health initiative action discussion. And I think this is going to be Sam Haworth. And I think you're going to be discussing a few things. Do you want to do them all together or independent of each other?
Whatever's your pleasure.
Okay, well, we have a status update and direction going forward. And then opportunities for, oh, that's not, okay, I misspoke. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is my first time presenting to you. I'm happy to be here. Again, my name is Sam Howarth, and I have an odd title. It's the Behavioral Health Service Administrator, working with the Behavioral Health Services Division. Katrina and Margarita are out of town, so they asked me to come talk to you today. So what I thought I'd do is just give you a sort of high-level update on what's front and center right now, and then later we'll visit the proposal that's before you after Ms. Pierce has a chance to talk. I think that's the way the agenda lines out. So, as I think you know, we were in the process of recruiting and bringing on new subcommittee members, and that's happened, and the new subcommittee members are beginning to get busy with the BHI subcommittees and steering committee. Our mobile crisis teams, we're running 4 units, 2 with APD, 2 with BCSO, and by all accounts realizing pretty neat successes in that what they are able to do is work with folks who are close to or experiencing a mental health crisis, provide the clinician who relates with that individual, and they've been able to stay in place, which, as opposed to being taken to an emergency department or a jail or cycling further. The RRC, as you know, is up and running 24/7. We have an average of about 4 individuals, releasees a night who spend the night. We've run about 5,000 people through the RRC since it's been open, which is a whopping 14 weeks. And the thing that I see, 2 things that I see happening is awareness of the RRC itself on both sides, meaning in the community and amongst inmates, is improving. So people are getting more familiar with the model, what to expect, what can happen there, the services that are available to releasees, et cetera. And that's good. I see it sort of as an iterative process. I'm seeing it that way now. So for example, the beginning was standing up the center, opening the doors, people coming through, and now we're at a place where we actually are beginning to transition plan well. So our partners at UNM, at Pathways, are actually beginning to build plans in the jail. That's actually through UNM Hospital. But then also the Pathways folks at the RRC working with people to operationalize those plans. And that'll get tighter as we get further down the road. The RFP, Ms. Pierce talked about the single site, the RFP to identify somebody who were an entity that would provide services at the single site, right, the supportive services and the linkages and such, is still on the street until October 5th. So if you know of providers that would be interested in doing that, let them know. It's on the county website. We continue planning, I'd say almost implementing, our crisis continuum. So most recently, we're working with UNM Hospital to finalize an intergovernmental agreement, which will look at providing more services and clinical services at the MATS campus, and includes standing up a new crisis triage center on a UNM hospital footprint, location to be determined. Two last things, I think. You know, we put out an RFP for training and education. We got responses. We're in the contract negotiations tomorrow. So we should have some news shortly about what will be available from a training and education standpoint soon. And the last one is, excuse me, we were awarded a SAMHSA grant to do early psychosis work with UNM Hospital and, I can't remember the name of the shop, Carly Bonham's shop. So we're excited about that. I think it's $400,000 a year for 4 years to look at youngsters. People who experience psychosis typically do it in their late teens, or mid to late teens, sometimes as early 20s. This is a grant that will fund the identification of people who are demonstrating signs of early psychosis and intervening before they have an episode. So that's new to the UNM sort of array of services. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Quesada.
Yeah, I have a question, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it, but one of the things that I was really looking at when we are releasing people from jail and taking them to our center, because 5,000 people, that's a lot of our citizens, because once they get out, they're citizens, and I think there's citizens in there, but people would argue with me about that. But I was wondering, have you talked to, because I had put a suggestion in that we talk to the state as a partner, so when they do get out and they go into that facility, that we're able to offer them some kind of identification, a state identification, because, a lot of the services that we provide in that facility, you have to have an ID to fill out the paperwork. And a lot of these people don't have that. And I thought that would be a great thing that could happen in that facility. So if you can't answer that question now, that's okay. But if I could get an answer from that question, if they've even looked into it or where they're at on that, I think everybody here agrees that that's something that's kind of needed in there.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Quesada, you're in luck. I actually can answer that question because I'm the person at the department who's been working on that issue. And long story short, there's a group right now that's looking at opening up the Real ID Act to do a number of things. One of the things that is not in the current draft legislation amending the Real ID Act is what you're proposing. However, I've spoken with those folks and they want to include it. And the idea would be we'd have to come up with some precise language about it, but a booking sheet that has psychometrically approved photograph, fingerprint, et cetera, so that there's an absolutely legitimate demonstration that the individual with the booking sheet is in fact who they say they are. But it's a group of people, a sort of coalition of people that have come together to amend the statute, and they are interested in adding that language. So I think we will.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Stebbins and then Mrs. Neer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Sam, you said that you have recently, the BHI has recently recruited and engaged some new subcommittee members. When did that happen and how did you recruit?
Here I'm going to have to feign ignorance, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hart Stebbins. I was not involved in that process at all, so I don't know the answer.
Okay, because I know 9 months ago, I think there was kind of a call for volunteers, and then that was put on hold. So for some reason, the new people were not considered for the subcommittees. I'm wondering if maybe you can just ask Katrina, or whoever was responsible, to get back to me on that. Did you draw from that same pool, or was there kind of a new recruitment effort for that? So, appreciate
Yeah,
that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I'll ask.
Sounds good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, Ms. Nair, sorry.
Thanks, Chair Pena. Thank you, Mr. Howard. I just wanted to acknowledge a couple things that we've been able to do together. First, the mobile crisis teams. Our administration kind of got to walk in on that pre-baked, all ready to go. It's been a really great initiative. The main constraint that I've heard is exactly what Ms. Pierce was talking about earlier, which is there's not really a place to take folks once we encounter them with either the mobile crisis team or the COAST program. So I think the experiences of those teams are going to be really important as we develop these partnerships together that we've been talking about. Second, I'm so excited to hear about the medical supervision at MATS. I think we've all been talking about that for a long time. I think it's going to be great for expanding the utility of that facility, so just wanted to thank you for that. And then third, I think we met in my office when you came to educate me about the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, the LEAD program. We love that. I think we put in for an application. I think maybe we didn't get the money, but I just wanted to express our thanks for your work on that, and also that, you know, if we decide to try to put in for that money again, we'd love to be part of that.
Great. And Madam Chair, Ms. Nair, on the LEAD front, you're correct in that we didn't get funded for our proposal to SAMHSA. That did not happen. There were only 9 proposals funded in that competition nationally. It was pretty stiff competition. We do have one more proposal out there, which we're cautiously optimistic that it will get funded. I mean, we can't say, but it's a strong proposal in a less competitive competition. Yeah. And a smaller amount of money, unfortunately.
Thank you. Next, we have, are there any members of the subcommittees here?
Good afternoon, Chairman Pena, and councilors and commission. I'm Sister Agnes. I'm on the Supportive Housing Subcommittee. I'm the vice chair. I'm here to urge your support for the agenda item of $2,000 for case management services that is linked together with the housing vouchers, and it's on your tonight's agenda. And a primary example of that, my own working with the homeless, I notice a significant amount of late teens and early 20 individuals who are entering the criminal justice system at a very high rate. And the programs that we have done through the Behavioral Health Initiative, like Community Connections, the Reentry Resource Center, our housing vouchers, and our case management, is a showing of how we've used our tax dollars and linkages to help these individuals who I call the lost generation. When I was in the shelter, I would see so many young adults, and had me concerned because they were coming out of the jail and coming to the shelter. They were also substance abuse and very violent. So with this, adding on the $200,000 of case management with the housing, it may help this target population in the resources of safety, security, and my most important part is dignity. So I urge your support. The $200,000 will be spent quite well, and thank you for your opportunity to talk.
Thank you, sister. Is there anyone else here? That's it. Well, thank you for being here this evening. So next item we have is report on City of Albuquerque Behavioral Health Initiatives. Again, the presenter is Ms. Pierce.
Thank you, Madam Chair Pena. While the handout's getting handed out, I appreciate Commissioner's comment about behavioral health, homelessness. They are very interrelated, although we know all homeless people do not have a behavioral health issue. So I really appreciate Commissioner O'Malley's comment about that. I'm just here on two separate parts of the agenda. What I did want to say that as I've been here in this new administration now 6 months, part of the mayor's vision was to really have some more in-house subject matter experts, if you will. And I think many people here on the council have had the opportunity to meet Lisa Huval, who's our Deputy Director for Homelessness and Housing, comes with a very deep background on addressing homeless issues. It's been a joy to have her as part of the team, as also Gilbert Ramirez, who's the Deputy Director for Behavioral Health and Wellness. Is a social worker by background, and he's been an added complement to the team. So one thing I've really appreciated about as a director of Family and Community Services, we're really working together and not staying in our silos, because whether it's education, homelessness, or behavioral health, they're all really almost a Venn diagram and working together. So the handout that, I'm going to start with the colored side, that is our FY18 city county funding with the Behavioral Health Initiative. And I think folks have seen this before, council members have seen this before, but I just wanted to give this background before we talk about some of the FY19 funding. So great questions have been asked. How are we working with the subcommittees? And the overall, I'll say that everything that we're doing in behavioral health funding in this city is connected and fits in the framework of the Behavioral Health Initiative in the subcommittees. Mr. Ramirez, the Deputy Director of Behavioral Health, he does sit on the steering committee as well, and we do have staff that are on many of the subcommittees. So overall, in big picture, about 15.8 million of city programming has gone in FY18 in those different categories, if you will: crisis services, community supports, supportive housing, and prevention intervention. I don't want to spend very much time on this because I'm going to have us flip the page and talk about FY19. But one thing I do want to add is you'll see Albuquerque Police Department, the $846,000 that's related to crisis service. And in this, fiscal year, there's been the launch of HEART, which is from the Albuquerque Fire Department, which is the Home Engagement and Alternative Response Team. And that's another $371,000 that is also in that crisis bucket, if you will, responding to the crisis needs. So that's additional money that's been added. But what I'd like to do is, if you please turn the page on the backside, and these are FY19 projects that have been funded. And I'm saying joint because you'll see city money there, but in many instances there's county money, because again, this comes out of the overall framework of the Behavioral Health Initiative to really address the gaps and needs. So this is where I think we really have been shining, working together to address our community need. And some of this is going to overlap with what Mr. Hayworth was talking about. So the first item we'll talk about is the intensive case management for people with substance abuse disorders. So you can see this is a $750,000, investment on the city. And this contract was just newly executed. UNMH received that award. And once we get these 8 total workers off the ground, 2 of them will be at the Resource Reentry Center that we heard about from Mr. Hayworth, as well as 1 will be at MATS, and then others will be in community partners. And I think this speaks to Commissioner Quesada's, the importance of community partnership. 1 will be at First Choice, 1 will be at First Nations, 1 will be at Healthcare for the Homeless, and 1 will be at Albuquerque Ambulance. So overall, this is addressing one of the gaps identified by the Behavioral Health Initiative. We're really excited to see what the results will be, and this contract was just launched in September. The second item is what we were referring to earlier, the single site permanent supportive housing, but that can be confusing. It's just one site providing services to 42 people with behavioral health concerns. It's permanent housing, where that is their home, where they'll be receiving the services they need to have a safe and productive life. I think we're really learning a lot on this, and we're learning between the city and the county. This is a joint project. I'll say it's been an honor to really work with those neighborhoods that were really embracing the concept but want it to work for all. So I think we've had some really productive conversations, and that's moving forward. And I hope we're learning a lot there, because I think this is a model for our community. This will help 42 people, but there are many others that need that kind of supportive housing and that intense support. The third item that you heard about earlier that we're very excited about are mobile crisis teams. And roughly right now, because it's been in play about 6 months, I understand there's been about 558 responses, about a third of those in the county, 2/3 with APD. And again, the beauty of that is, again, like we heard, are clinicians there, people with the behavioral health experience to work right then and there to really help people with a behavioral health concern. And you can see there's a City of Albuquerque investment of $456,000, and then there's a $1 million investment by Bernalillo County. The next one, the Community Connections Reentry Supportive Housing. These are individuals that are coming out of jail. They may have severe mental illness. They need housing and help. So again, the City of Albuquerque investment, $500,000 with $1.3 million from Bernalillo County. And again, I just think it's important. This is the overall framework from BHI where we're coming together to respond to gaps. The next one, we had the pleasure of hearing Ms. Holtram at the last meeting a month ago. She mentioned kind of as a surprise announcement that we're very excited that the city was awarded a SAMHSA grant. But again, we did this in collaboration with our partners, knowing this was a gap to be filled. So this will really allow folks to get court-ordered treatment, to get connected to a provider, keep folks out of the hospital, and really get them the services that they need. And these are folks with severe mental health problems. I think we stand to learn a lot as a community on how this works, but for our community to receive that SAMHSA grant is really a feather in everyone's cap that's sitting here tonight. That's a collaborative effort, and we're really looking forward to that. The last one I'll highlight is the Substance Abuse Treatment Provider Network. Again, that annual investment is about 1.6 from the city. I want to point out that used to be over 2 million, but our landscape has changed. As Medicaid is expanded and Medicaid is covering more of these services, that's where we've moved that money back up into number one, into intensive case management. And I think this is just showing the flexibility when the landscape changes and when Medicaid is reimbursing, which is a good thing for all of us to be a little bit flexible. As I understand it, we also, with this substance abuse treatment, we are really looking at the medication-assisted treatment. And this is really important with people with addiction, whether it's Suboxone, and we really need to look at that and what kinds of treatment is needed. And again, one of the things we've learned so far, along with our county partners, is that right now we've served about 1,400 folks annually, and what we're learning from the data is people are staying in treatment longer. So that's really important. The longer that you're in treatment and staying in that, whether it's medical assisted or getting a therapy, the better we are off as a community. So the total City of Albuquerque investment in this for FY19 is $6.2 million. I'm sorry, I didn't add up the county investment, but I was responding to the request on the city's piece of the Behavioral Health Initiative.
Any questions? Commissioner O'Malley?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I have a couple of questions. So we've got the Substance Abuse Network. How is the $1.2 million funded?
Are we talking about number 6?
Yes.
all of our money here, with the exception of 2 and 5, are general fund. So let me just go back. The city money under number 2, under the single site, that was out of a housing fund that the city had, the 2 million there. Then we've got the SAMHSA grant on number 5, but the rest of those funding sources are general fund money, is general fund.
And the grant, the subsidy grant is, of course, federal dollars.
Yes, at number 5, the SAMHSA is federal dollars. So
Okay.
number 2 are 2 million there, comes out of a housing pot, and number 1, 3, 4, and 6 is general fund.
Okay, so we have, of course, as we move forward with county funding, we put it through the subcommittee process. Has some of this gone through the subcommittee process that the city is funding with their dollars?
Well, I'm going to say a qualified yes, because I understand this was joint discussions, because these are the gaps that have been identified, and all these fit into the overall categories of behavioral health. But I'm going to say a qualified yes, but my understanding is yes, and I could follow up on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Stebbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Carol. I think you can see that I had asked for this. You know, it seems as long as I've been on this board and we've been discussing behavioral health, Katrina or someone from our behavioral health initiative has come up and given kind of an update, and it seemed like it was time for the city so that we can get an idea of what each local government is doing. So this is great to see. Want to thank you for all your work. As I've said before, it is wonderful having you in that job. So thanks for being here tonight, and look forward to working with you and hearing from you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. So next we have approval of the BHI reentry and high utilizer community connections funding increase.
Madam Chair, councilors, commissioners, if I might, Commissioner Hart-Stebbins, I have an answer to your question. It was the same pool of applicants that the subcommittee members who were selected were pulled from.
Thank you for following up on that.
Sure. Okay, the proposal before you is actually, I think, kind of exciting news. The long and short of it is this, is that when funding was allocated to community connections to provide housing vouchers, scatter site housing vouchers, the idea was pretty simple, that we'd fund as many vouchers as we possibly could, and we would marry a case manager to people who were receiving those vouchers so that they were not only housed, but they were also connected to services. So fast forward almost 2 years, the Behavioral Health Division started working with our housing department here at the county, and Ms. Valdez did some analysis, looked at our budget, looked at how we were administrating the program and doing doing vouchers. And what we learned is that some of the assumptions we made in the beginning were not bearing out. So 2 big things converged. One is the fair market value for housing in Albuquerque is less than we assumed. It's gone down. And the other big one was we budgeted assuming that it might be families that were accessing the vouchers and would need larger apartment spaces, what have you. And we found over the last couple of years that the majority of people accessing housing through the vouchers are single, so it's less expensive. Long story short, what that means is that we now have in our existing budget enough for approximately 120, we're cautiously optimistic it could be more, housing vouchers. The trick then is the model that we're funding requires that there be case managers who work with the people who would receive these additional housing vouchers. So the request simply is for $200,000 to contract with one of our existing case management providers working with Community Connections to provide those additional case managers for the new recipients of the new housing vouchers.
Any questions?
Move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and second to approve. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next item is other business. Does anyone have any other business? No other business. So our next meeting will be October 25th at 5 p.m. in these chambers. There being no business, this meeting is adjourned. No further business.